You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Hey, Power Athlete Nation, I got a heavy hitter for you today with Kasia Siwosz, a former Eastern Bloc tennis player that ran her course on the pro circuit, took a trip to go to UC Berkeley and play tennis, which is, near and dear to my heart as a UC Berkeley alma mater, got into private equity, and now does coaching for high net worth individuals around the globe. So hard-hitting podcast with a relatively new individual into the podcasting game, but an excellent conversation with Kasia Siwosz. Buckle up. What years did you go to Berkeley?
So I went to community college in Kansas, Arkansas City, Kansas, a very small one called County College for 2 years. And then I transferred to four-year university. And then I went to Berkeley for the last 2 years. So I graduated 2011.
Okay, 2011. Yeah, I was there 94 through 98.
Okay.
And then I got my master's. Yeah.
The new stadium is up and running because I remember they were fixing it.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I think I really want to go back, but it's been 10 plus years, COVID, kids, and it's just like you say, just travel's become so much more complicated, and it is far away from me. It's like 14 hours flight. It's
a long flight, especially from London. I mean, it's like not only do you have to go to the US, but now, or obviously somewhere on the East Coast, but now you got to fly another 6 hours to get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we went to a game. Was it last year? Yeah, we went to a game last year. It was either last year or the year before. I donated money, so they put my name on some wall. So they sent me this picture of it, and my kids wanted to see it, so we went and I got pictures of them. So we got to do a tour and got to see all the nice stuff. So it was cool.
Well, I mean, your name's on the wall, so that's nice. That's nice.
Well, I had to go check it for sure because with Cal, you're never too sure. I mean. I remember one year we donated lockers, and then years later we showed up to see the lockers, and they'd completely redone the locker room. I think Aaron Rodgers had given money, and they basically deleted all that stuff. So I was like, man, if my name's on a wall, I'm going to show up and see it. So at least I can get a picture before they smash the wall and put up a new one. Because they're always
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, they're always in the way of trying to raise money. Where'd you live when you were in Berkeley? Do you remember?
Which area?
Yeah, do you remember where you lived?
So I actually lived in San Francisco because at that time I had a boyfriend who was working in a city. So, my coach was nice enough that actually I could live with him, save some money on rent. And I was basically commuting. I lived in, what's it called? Infinity Tower, just by the Bay Bridge. So it was not a bad commute from San Francisco to, Berkeley. But yeah, essentially it was every day back and forth. But for me, at least I could save money.
Did you drive or did you have to take the BART?
Yeah, I drive. I drive his car to save even more money. I was a broke student, international with, and Berkeley, I think, it was, if you had to pay rent out of the money we're getting, it was with no help from parents. I think, you were really getting squeezed.
I know this well. Our scholarship checks were like $740. And my rent was $475, and my mom and dad kicked me a few $100 extra, but we were so far below the poverty line that
yeah. And I think even for us at the time, I don't think it was below 900 or 850. So yeah, it was, I think, without parents' help. I don't remember eating in one of the sort of takeaway Asian places where I was getting rice with chicken for $4.
It's called Steve's Korean Barbecue.
There you go. So yeah, but at least I could get fed, and you get some points on your card and stuff like that. But you just have to make it happen.
Yeah. No, I think it teaches resilience. I think it's a good experience, and with the NIL and these kids coming in, I mean, we'll see some UT players driving around in Lamborghinis here, and
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, the money's so big now with that NIL deal that these players are getting paid probably commensurate with what NFL players, if not more. So it's I appreciate them getting paid, but I also think that there's something about struggling when you're younger and the grittiness nature. And you said, you're going to Steve's Korean Barbecue for $5, picking up 3 lunches because you're going to eat lunch over the next couple of days. I think that teaches you something, teaches resilience. And I'm nervous that now maybe these kids don't have to struggle. So when they do get to the NFL and it is a real fist fight, that maybe it was too easy for too early and maybe they're not as hungry.
Yeah, I think, I don't think I've had it easy my whole life, but now I have kids and I'm definitely bringing them in a different environment compared to where I grew up. And at the time, I didn't think I was missing on anything. I had food on the table. Me and my parents lived in one room, probably, the size of like a very small sort of living room. My grandma was in the other one and we didn't have passports. We didn't travel. Like I probably had Coca-Cola for the first time when I was maybe 11 years old. And I think when I look back, I was like a bit pissed off at my parents. Like why they cannot give me money so I can, drive a Range Rover and wear Uggs. Like I remember in Texas, all these girls, but now I appreciate it so much.
Yeah.
They didn't do it because maybe if they had the money, they would give it to me, but I love the struggle I had at the time. So right now, I know the tangible things are great. Don't take me wrong. I think, I think they buy more time so you can do things that you love. But the struggle, I think it's extremely important. And if it happens too fast and people are not prepared to handle the money or handle things that are being given, it's not for free because I'm sure they're amazing athletes and stuff like that. But yeah, I think they get lost in just tangible things that do not matter anything, because if something happens to them physically, like it's always going to go to nothing. I remember even playing tennis. Don't forget, I got to university when my career was over. Like the difference between football players and tennis players, or maybe other sports, like in the US, is that as a football player, you get there to get to play NFL, to get to actually make money. And tennis players, at the age of 18, if you don't make it, like this is it. You go to US to kind of at least leverage your tennis experience so your school can get paid, be paid for. There's very few tennis players that actually make it, pro at the level where, is actually good enough so they can sustain themselves. So it's a little bit different. Yeah.
So I was reading through your bio. You grew up in Poland?
Yeah.
So where, what years was that, like pre coming down to the wall, pre-communism, post-communism? Like what was the time frame?
So I am 86. So just around the time. Like I said, at the time I didn't think anything was wrong. I think with any communist country, you just kept under a certain regime and you just don't know any better. I think what my generation saw is our parents being either happy or upset about certain things that have happened like maybe too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a society where, everyone had to be kept at the same level, right? Even if everyone made more or less same money, or you were giving, a piece of paper would say, you get, 4 pounds of meat, 3 pounds of sugar, and everyone is pretty much the same. And the problem with that is then it kills sort of creativity. It kills, wanting more. Even if you wanted to be something more, like you couldn't really get it. And especially with education. So I saw like a sport was a way out, not so much education. So, tennis was just kind of by accident, happened to me. And it was a way out of the country that, in my opinion, is just a little bit sad. And people around me were sad, not sad, but they were just deprived of opportunities. I think things have changed and shifted a lot, especially when Poland joined European Union, and it's a great country, but there's still a lot of that in people's mindset.
We interrupt this episode with a shameless self-promotion. Are you a field or court sport athlete looking to dominate the leaderboard? Let me introduce you to Field Strong. Take your inner athlete to the next level by exposing yourself to the advanced training techniques that contributed to my 10 years in the NFL. Unlock pinnacle performance and level up your athletic potential today. Head to powerathletehq.com/fieldstrong and claim your 7-day free trial. Now back to the show. Well, the wall came down in '89, so you guys were rated that generation of like post-communism, where all of a sudden now like that's got to be an amazing transition to be there at that time, where all of a sudden you have this kind of regime, and now all of a sudden it's like it's kind of the ending of communism, and now you guys are these free states. So with tennis, at what age did you start playing? And like I know tennis is big in Russia. I mean, I remember reading about like the Russian tennis academy that Anna Kournikova and all those girls came out of. So tennis was one of those sports. Was there something similar to what you had in Poland? And was that kind of like going into that kind of communist regime where they're kind of segmenting, young athletes into different sports?
So I started probably at the age of 6, 7. And what I would say is tennis at the time, there were like one or two players that were like all right. But I think my generation was the first generation that set things on fire. What I mean by that is that right now we have the number one tennis player in the world is Polish girl. And then the one before her, Radwańska, she was in top 10 for 10 years plus. And there is more and more Polish players coming in. So I feel like my generation was the first one who had to kind of really push through that sort of heavy snow to allow others, like the girls that are right now, had the opportunity to play at such a high level. There was no really money in tennis. And when you think about like sports, team sports, like when you're a player, all you have to make sure is that you are good. And, someone will pick you and then the team will handle everything else, training, money, travel, and all that stuff. But when you play individual sport, there's no such a thing. So you have to worry about coaches, about the money, about the travel, about tournaments, about everything else. And, it can get very expensive very quickly. And a lot of tournaments are all around the world. And as you can imagine, it's a very privileged and expensive sport. So a lot of places where the tournaments were hosted were extremely expensive. Okay. They were never sort of, a small city in a small town of Texas. It would be probably Austin and some very expensive club, and all the hotels around were quite luxurious, and, you have to pay for it. There's no federation that pays for it. So that was a big struggle, and it still is a struggle for a lot of tennis players where they have, and families, to be honest with you, because a lot of families will go to debt to support their children who, there's only top 100 players in the world for men and female. And even if you're top 100, you have for a long time to actually make it worth it, in a sense that you actually come out of it with some sort of investment. And I know people that have been there for 2, 3, 4 years in the top 100, between 80 and 60 and 50, every now and then 30. And right now they're teaching tennis. It's nothing wrong with it, but it's not as glamorous as, even I thought. I just thought, you get there and you get the money and you do it for, you do it because you love it, but also you essentially give up everything at the age of 6 years old, like no parties. No, nothing. You just practice 6, 8 hours a day. And usually it's very isolated. It's just you and the coach, a hitting partner. You compete against females. So it's difficult to make friends with females because they might end up being your opponents, right? There's no real team environment. Yeah?
I'm always amazed with women how you would think like with men, there's some brotherhood. I always feel terrible for women that this idea of sisterhood doesn't exist. I mean, this WNBA deal like that, these women, I think it was like Caitlin Clark and that other girl come in, and all of a sudden now they're getting private jets and they're trying to raise the element of the game. And these women have knives out trying to kill them. And it's, you would think that they would have some form of shared, hey, we're doing this together. And it's not them, me. And it's man, I feel bad for women. It's knives out at all time. This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market. We've built an online training business by partnering with Train Heroic to deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Hammer, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training. And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best training tech in the business, head to trainheroic.com/powerathletehq. And now back to the show.
It is I don't know why, to be honest, but it's not only in sports. I remember when I finished sort of playing sports at the pro level and then the college level, I went to investment banking, which is also very.
So you played on the pro tour, and then when that kind of came to an end, then it was like, now I need to try to go out and get an education. I'm going to use tennis to go play in college.
Pretty much, I got to the point where
I love it. It's great.
I was like 700 or something, and like it would require so much money that I just simply didn't have. An additional 3 to 5 years of me pushing to the level where I would get there. But I just simply didn't have the money. And with the US, obviously, you cannot go above certain level because otherwise you wouldn't be able to be considered amateur to play for the college. And then you have to go through all the compliance and stuff like that. And I just had to make that call at the age of 18, and that's all I knew from the age of 6. From the age of 6, I wanted to be next Maria Sharapova.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that transition where you basically say, okay, your dream is over.
Mm.
Now and the worst is that you go to college and you get to play at much lower level. And this is just a job. And it's almost like, I had fun. It was amazing. But, imagine if you're playing for Cal or playing NFL, and then at some point that ends and, you play with like amateurs, right? From like, not even US, you play, I don't know, some European team, right? That just plays. So it is like all my teammates went through the same thing. But the problem is that we knew that after we graduate, this is just like a temporary job, just to, obviously get us by. And, it's difficult to forget about that. The transition is very difficult. And the next transition, obviously, you leave the college and you enter, the real world. That oftentimes, I don't feel like I was prepared because tennis or any sport, I think, is so demanding. And you try so hard to do your best in pro sports, then at school, and then play well for school. The job is a distant thing. But when it comes to that day when, you graduate, or maybe in NFL, you don't get drafted, or, you don't get to have professional career, like it's another clash. And I feel like I've experienced that, and it's not easy.
Did you and Sharapova are about the same age. Did you have a chance to play against her at some point?
No. I see her playing, but to be honest with you, like in tennis, it's like if you'd see us hitting on a tennis court, you wouldn't know who is better. Like we would exactly same level, but if we start playing a match, like she would destroy me. The difference between she was number 1, I was number 400. Like it's, obviously the difference in inches and the small things and a mindset. And
she's also 6'2". She was probably like one of the bigger tennis players. in terms of like height.
I'm 5'11", so I think I'm also quite tall.
Yeah, no, you got it. I'm a tennis fan. I've always loved watching tennis. I watch the U.S. Open. I watch Wimbledon, the French Open, Australian. So like I have always been a tennis fan. And I think it was growing up. This is kind of hilarious, but I try to explain this to my kids constantly. When we were growing up, there was like not much on television. Like maybe there was a few shows, but like they ended and you just didn't watch them. So we didn't really watch much television. But I do remember like tennis and sporting events, like if those things were on, like the Tour de France. We always watched that stuff because it was just good TV. So I think just growing up, like my mom would always watch it. And so just watching tennis, I became a fan. And I just love the different surfaces and the fact that like certain players, like a guy like Michael Chang, who was a little guy, could go out and play such a high level at the French Open on the clay. And then you got Boris Becker, who's big serve, and Agassi. So like growing up as a kid, I really liked watching it, and then coming in and obviously seeing, newer players come in. But I've always been a tennis fan. So I think
right.
My brother still plays. I don't play. I got into lifting weights and playing football pretty early. So that was kind of ended my tennis stuff. But I do enjoy watching it as a sport.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a interesting game. Just two people, one ball, and I think it's also it's a different type of sport. When you go to football, game, any team sports generally is very loud. It's more like an entertainment. But when you go to tennis matches, it's just quiet. All right. I mean, tennis players will get upset if someone is like, I don't know, drinking soda too loud, right,
Yeah.
through the straw or something. So it is just this a little bit. It's a different type of sport, but I think it's very engaging, and especially for women, I think it's not like this. That one of the few sports that actually, they can make quite a bit of money. When you compare it to athletics, golf is probably another one. So I think
Yeah, I hate watching golf. I rather watch paint dry than watch golf. I'm not a golf fan at all. So
yeah,
we had a
same
guy
here.
we had a guy on the podcast a couple months ago who was an expert like in performance enhancing, and his kind of plea is that like if you want to level the field, get rid of all testing for sports. And as we got into it, he felt that one of the most, let's say, like one of the most performance enhanced sports that people don't necessarily realize as being performance enhanced was tennis. These players will go out and play 3-hour matches and be able to do that in such a high level. He felt that like performance enhancing was, taking some form of drugs. Like I know, didn't Sharapova got caught for like some form of like, I think it was like melodrome, or which was wild. It was like something to do with the heart, but then they put it on the list, didn't tell her. I mean, it was kind of a weird deal, but he felt that like for the men especially, like performance enhancing was a huge deal. I don't know if that was something necessarily you saw, but I always was curious on that one.
I've heard stories only, but I think it's a sport where you don't get. Let's put it this way: when you play any sort of tournament and you actually get to play it all the way to the finals, you play every day or every other day. Your matches last anywhere between an hour to 4 hours, and it's very, very intensive on your body. And then when you win this tournament, there's next one the next week. So I think, especially now with all the advancements in the technology and everything else, I think most of the sports will use it and abuse it. I don't think tennis necessarily is. I think there will be money for this, right? And people probably use it and abuse it, but I personally haven't seen any. Like we would take a lot of supplements. I've taken a lot of supplements, creatine or whatever, like all this sort of. I was always very sort of skinny, so I had to take a lot of supplements just to make sure that, because the tennis match will last 3-4 hours and you play like, I don't know, somewhere where it's really, really hot, and they don't care. It's not like playing in the evening, right? When it's cool and nice and stuff like that. And even if the tennis match lasts an hour and a half, it's not very long, but you're still out on a full sun. I remember playing in Texas, like we were practicing, and it was just, it was brutal.
Texas is the word I like to use is spiteful. Like the weather here is like angry, it's spiteful, it's egregious. Like it's just angry and spiteful because and it's wild. Like if you're in the sun, it is almost unbearable. And then you get a little bit of shade and it's like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then the sun comes back out. So, I'm from California and, obviously went to Berkeley and then, played in, Philadelphia and kind of lived all over the US and played for a few different teams. And I will tell you, of anywhere I've ever been and anywhere I've ever lived, Texas is a different type of heat and intensity. So, one of my favorites was always watching the Australian Open, how hot it was during the Australian Open, and especially coming off of, the hard surface. And I mean, just, it'd be 120 degrees on the court for those guys, and they're out there playing for 3-4 hours. So it's either just incredible conditioning, will, or I don't know, according to that guy, he thought it was performance enhancing, but at the end of the day, I don't care. As long as as long as the entertainment's good and it's moving well, I'm excited for it.
No, I think it's, I wouldn't know, and I don't want to comment on that because, but the condition, at the same time, what you see with top tennis players in the world, like they become very selective on which tournaments they play. They cannot really play more than like probably 15 tournaments in a year, because they making it all the way to the finals or quarterfinals. When you kind of mid-level, not mid-level, but not like top 50, you tend to play 20 or 30 tournaments because maybe you play 1 or 2 matches and then you lose, or rarely make it to the top. So there is time for recovery. But what I would say, at least in tennis, I think people start spending way more time on strength and conditioning versus just technical abilities, because it became so physical, the tennis game. Back in the days, they were playing with the wooden rackets, right? Or just kind of like bouncing the ball quite gently. Right now, I remember my practice when I was practicing, like, I don't know, 6 to 8 hours a day. I think probably 60% of my time was either spent on the gym or just outside of a tennis court, because we had to be so much more physically prepared. And technical part was important, but not as important as strength and conditioning.
Interesting. So obviously tennis ends, you come to the US, continue to play tennis, end up graduating from Berkeley. And then what was the transition after that?
So look, I was just so always not addicted, but I love the performance. I love being around people who, are sort of high achievers. And I always had a very clear goal on what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a tennis player. Then I wanted to graduate from the best university in the world. And I consider UC Berkeley the best in the world.
Go Bears.
And then
Go Bears.
Go Bears. And none of this was easy or straightforward. And then when I graduated, or when I was about to graduate, or through my studies, I was thinking, okay, what can I do? And, as sad as it sounds, I was like, I want to do something where I'll make a lot of money. And maybe this is not the right reason, but I was still young. I didn't know what I wanted, because tennis was the only thing I wanted. And I never could figure out what would be my next thing. So I'm like, I might as well go and make money. So I was like, okay, why don't I do investment banking? At the time, my ex-boyfriend was investment banker. And I think it was not so much, maybe it was a combination of money and dedication that you needed to do this job. I was never a 9 to 5 person. And okay, investment banking is like you're talking about 80 to 120 hours a week. So I've always been on this a bit crazy side of things where I wanted to be all in. I didn't know any better. So I got into investment banking. And, again, I felt like I was around people that are very smart, very driven. And it was just entering just different field of, the game of banking. But the mindset was very similar to athletes, which attracted me, in my opinion. And it was tough. It was as tough as some conditioning training that you've had as an athlete. This side was like, being focused, dedicated, doing the work, putting the hours, making an effort, for 100 hours, a week. A lot of sleepless nights. But I think with anything, if you don't really like it that much, or you don't really enjoy it, it will show. So for me, it was, I spent 5-6 years in banking. And then I've had that sort of desire and itchiness to do something on my own. And I was like, hey, what would be cool to do? And to be honest, again, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to do something different. I didn't want to work for the corporate. And at that time, we started thinking about opening a restaurant. So I went into restaurant business. I've opened it. I barely could make scrambled eggs. So it's a bit sort of, crazy idea. I've never really worked in a restaurant. And we built it from scratch. I thought also, I'll go from investment banking, working from 100 hours a week to less and be sort of like the CEO of the company. And, to my surprise, I was, working pretty much the same hours. And, I think work in a kitchen is extremely demanding. And I was doing everything from managing staff to chopping the carrots, unloading deliveries.
What was the restaurant like? What was the theme of the restaurant?
So the theme of the restaurant was, in San Francisco, there was this San Francisco soup company. Do you remember?
No, I don't.
No? Okay, so
what year would this have been?
I don't know, it should be still there. San Francisco Soup Company. They were making this clam chowder in the bread bowl.
Oh, yeah.
But they had a thing.
Oh, down on Fisherman's Wharf.
I think at the time they probably had like 15 or 20 locations, maybe not now. Yeah, they're still there.
Yeah.
So I remember it's like, okay, if that works in San Francisco, the weather is nice. Like in London, it's like rains all the time. It's generally cold. Like what's better than, nice, soup? So the concept was actually, having 10 to 12 different soups, put them sort of around offices. And that then evolved to like a, different type of, but it was mainly like breakfast and lunch. But then we started doing deliveries. This is when the Uber Eats kicked in. We have also like the company called Deliveroo, which is something similar, a competitor. So a lot of deliveries started happening. So instead of like working only maybe breakfast and lunch, then we start doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner because we're also serving offices that were, they were staying late at night, so we're delivering. But so yeah, that was for 3 years. It was quite challenging because I went from working in investment banking with highly educated people to working with people that they, especially before Brexit, that was the first job that any immigrant would get in a restaurant. So a lot of them didn't speak English. They didn't necessarily care that much about the job. So I would say in the restaurant business, the hardest part is just to manage staff. And we had the rotation was so high and retraining people, and anxiety of your staff not showing up. It was a lot to handle. So I think the restaurant business has a lot of fixed cost infrastructure, a lot of moving pieces that you need to track and make sure they are you comply with, and health and safety of the food for your clients as well as the employees. So yeah, it was interesting.
Isn't that really the problem in any business, is the employees and the staffing? I mean, if you think terms of managing people, I mean, that is that skill, I think, for any small business, or really just anything that's moving out of this, like, kind of small business into something bigger, it really just comes down to being able to manage a good team. And more importantly, being able to find good employees and people that are consistent and do a good job, more so than, employees that are just transactional, that are just trading time for money.
Yeah, no, I think, I 100% agree. And maybe if you have a product, then product can sell itself, but then you still have to have people behind it, right? To make sure that they care enough. So yeah, it was the hardest part. And I thought, if you have a concept, if you have a product, like everyone will also believe in your idea, but it just doesn't work like that, right? People
it never
in
does.
jobs people are there for different reasons. And, similarly, I joined investment banking because I had my vision of that we were making some money, and that was all. But look, I think I've learned so much things in investment banking, but after a while, I just figured out this is just not for me. And but I've done a lot of different things that was just, I could probably do better, but from every, I guess, angle, I was able to take what I wanted or what I needed, and I could implement it somewhere else. But equally, I made mistakes across the board. With my pro tennis career, with schools, with my restaurant, with investment banking. But I think as you make mistakes, like, you get to actually learn. And I remember the mistakes much more than my wins. So I think, I was either naive or stupid, but I've always just kept going. And it got me to the point where, then after a restaurant, I joined venture capital. I was utilizing on my experience in investment banking and entrepreneurship. And then I start investing in early stage consumer tech companies, which was a nice blend. I really liked it. And then a COVID hit. And, I think a lot of people had just this aha moment, or the moment of actually thinking what they want to do. And at the time I started having also, I was pregnant. I was like, well, who's going to hire me now? And I started thinking what I'm going to do with my career. My husband is also in finance. He works quite long hours, travels a lot. And it's like, well, if I go back to finance, I'm going to work like 80 hours a week, and the kids will never see anybody. So I wanted to find something that I would actually like and could provide income, and I could have a family, which is difficult, right?
Oh no, my wife has an MBA from North Carolina, and she worked for BlackRock. So she managed a massive real estate portfolio for BlackRock and was a vice president and went on. And then she got pregnant with twins, or we got pregnant with twins rather, or no, she got pregnant. I was contributor, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I always hate when parents are like, and then and be like, believe me, I did the easy part. I did the easy part.
Especially with twins. Don't say we.
Yeah, no. I was like, I'm like the old adage in business, the chicken or the pig, the chicken contributed, the pig was committed. I always joke, I'm probably like the chicken in that thing. I just contributed. But yeah, similar deal. She, ends up having twins, and just the thought of going back and working 60 to 80 hours a week and, hiring a nanny to raise her kids, and that was just not appealing to her, and had to make a decision, even though she had just got a promotion and, made great money and was on it. So she had to walk away. And then periodically people that she's worked for have tried to pull her back in. And she's like, the thought of going in and having to travel and do all that. And she's like, I just don't want to wear high heels every single day. Like, it just, there were a lot of things that she just didn't want to do anymore. So I understand.
Yeah, it is hard. And I think I was not prepared, to be a mom. But I think, from a female perspective, like, a lot of things start, a lot of things end. For your career is, unfortunately, doesn't matter. Even if you are in it and you're very good, like, it's just becomes secondary.
Yeah.
And I've always been very driven about, what I wanted. I always want to be the best I could. And then if I couldn't, then I was okay, fine, let's just try something else, But, kids are, they require a lot of attention.
It'd probably be easier to go back to work. I've known plenty of women.
I love Mondays. I love Mondays, managing kids over the weekend. It's a full-on job, but Mondays feel like quite refreshing. And I remember, people telling me before we had kids, like, that week, the Mondays, the one with kids is like, oh, Mondays are the best. I'm like, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to Friday, right?
Or I hear people constantly like, oh man, I'm looking forward to this weekend. I'm like, you don't have any kids, do you? I'm like, no. I'm like, or it's like summer break and this. I mean, we're in the middle of summer break, and I got up this morning to train at 6:30. I have a NFL kid in town that we're doing a bunch of stuff, kind of prepping him to get ready to go back to training camp. And then I have, I trained some of the top Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighters in the world. So we trained at 6:30. Wow. I did, worked with him, NFL kid, until like 8:30, jumped in the car, got home, loaded up my daughter, and she had to go to basketball camp. My son's in horse riding camp. And then my other daughter is, she rides horses as well. So my wife sucked him into doing it. So, and then there were podcasts. So it's, when the kids are home at summer, everybody's like, oh, summer, it's actually more work for the parents, because now we have camps and to do this and this. And it's a lot of work, but, it's I feel like it's rewarding. I just hope that, and I tell the kids, I'm like, after all this work, I hope that you guys turn out and do something amazing, like cure cancer, figure out type 1 diabetes, solve the national debt. If we're in the throes of World War III, that you guys are the voice of, non-crazy people like there are here in the US. I mean, like, I'm like, dude, grow up to do something amazing. It's all worth it. If you guys grow up to do nothing, I'm going to be fucking pissed.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's tough to be a parent. And I feel like, I have young ones. I have one is 1 year old and one is 3 years old. So I know I'm just sort of at the beginning of my journey, but this is also like very physical, and, sleepless nights and, still change. Like, my older one is just out of diapers. So, at some point I just had like a little toddler, crawling here, and the other one like covered in shit. And like, I have shit under my fingernails, and a dog is licking it. And, it's and then you say it's all going to be worth it. But honestly, like, a lot of times I'm like, what the fuck have I done? Right. I mean, I could just, and then 5 minutes after they're hugging each other, and I'm like, oh my God, it's a very abusive relationship with your children. Right. It's like 90% is like, you just get hammered for this 10% of like unconditional happiness and cuteness and love. But it's tough. And then I think, on moms, I personally never wanted to give up jobs. So I actually work through my pregnancies, because for me, just being I think being just mom is the hardest job in the world.
Yeah.
So I just, I just didn't want to be just mom, because I don't think I could take it. Like, mentally, I would slaughter them. Like, it's just.
This is totally normal. My daughters, I have twin girls, which was a lot coming out the gate. But they're 12 years old and my little boy's 8, and it definitely gets a lot easier. And then it enters a really interesting zone that I'm in now, which is these preteen girls. So I got 2 preteen 12-year-old girls that are adding an element to my life that is really interesting, where every time you see them, they have this like scowl on their face, to the point where I'm like, what is going so wrong in your life that everything is awful? And and then I try to make humor and jokes. And my one daughter finds it hysterical. My other daughter, I don't think has ever found me funny. And I'm like, this is material. I'm like, if I was doing stand-up, I'd be getting laughs. I'm just hearing like crickets out of you. And she just finds nothing funny. And I even asked my other daughter, I'm like, what's up? Like, we always had a pretty good sense of humor. And she's like, she's not funny with me either. So I think it's definitely an interesting dynamic. And then my son is like the happiest, go luckiest, easiest kid. Like, Dad, whatever you want to do, let's go. Like, let's go out and build stuff. And but it definitely gets like, you are right in the baby fight. Where you got one in diapers, one out of diapers, and they're going both 2 different directions. So I remember that. And I, when I see people with it, like, I'm always like, it gets easier. Like, just keep the faith, just keep working. Don't get mad.
Yeah. Don't kill them. Yeah. don't sell them. No, they're great. But I have no shame saying that, when they are, whatever, at the nursery or with the nanny, or when I'm working, I can be a very good mom 2 to 6 hours a day during the week. But if it's more, like, it just gets to me. I think even now, like, there's so much pressure on parents to be this, gentle parenting. And I think, to an extent, there is pluses and minuses,
Is that how they raise kids in Eastern Bloc Poland?
No, definitely not. But I think, for us, was, teachers were allowed to hit you, but again, there's a flip side to everything. I think as a parent, at least I try to, I don't do the same things. I don't know what's going to be the outcome of it, but I just don't remember that, Eastern European, or I don't know if it's only Eastern European, this is what I know. And my parents were actually, very good. They never hit us, but what I saw around, like, hitting, screaming, making, kids feel guilty and not explaining, is like, why can you do this? Because just shut up. I think it kills a little bit of creativity, a little bit of self-confidence in those kids. And if you're not getting it from parents, then I think a lot of people go out there and seek it elsewhere.
Sure.
And I think if you don't get it from your parents, then it's not about being overly protective or cuddling and all that stuff, but there is a fine line between depriving your children of certain aspect of, security, self-esteem, because, if you don't get it from your parents, like, you go and try to find it somewhere else.
Sure. No, I firmly agree. There's an interesting balance of parenting between like, how do you like, I don't think rogue violence is a great way to parent, and just parents just beating their shit out of their kids. I mean, I'm sure that worked for a long, long time, but I think being able to have conversations with your kids where you can actually explain, like, consequences, and this is how things work. So for me, I've always been very analytical with it, where, like, you pull up on the street corner and there's a guy out there panhandling, and they're like, Dad, that guy's asking for money. And I'm like, well, do you know why he's asking for money? And I get into like a lot of the explanation. Like, if you don't work hard, you take drugs. I mean, these people are in this situation not because they did everything right. And you can say, oh, they're down on their luck, but like, there's a lot of decisions that lead to this. And so I talk a lot about like decision making and making good decisions and working hard. And when you look at the people that are successful, not on the corner, there's usually a series of working hard. I mean, there isn't a single professional athlete or person that's ever attained anything that didn't, unless you're a trust fund kid. But most of the people that I met that had rich parents were fucking awful. My mom always told us the worst thing you can be is a rich man's son. If you look at children of really rich people who provide the kids everything and no adversity, no hardship, they end up just being fucking pieces of shit. And, they never have any value because they've never had to work for anything. Years ago, I used to hang out with these billionaires. And the thing that kind of dawned on me one day is their perception of things was completely different. Because I think to have a good meal, you have had to have a bad meal. To like sleep in a shitty bed, to like appreciate a good bed. So you have to have something. Whereas if everything has always been the best, it's kind of like nothing's exciting, nothing's good. No food tastes better than anything else because they have no perception of this. And I realized that for all the money and the value and everything they had, they were the most morally bankrupt people because they had no appreciation for anything, no like for anything. And everything was just kind of like, it was very like what car is the best? I don't know, any one that I want. So it was really interesting for me. And so with my kids, more so than providing them anything that they've ever wanted, I try to provide them experiences or things and try to have, a different, because I think what happens is when you grow up maybe without stuff, all of a sudden you have kids and you want to give your kids the things that maybe you didn't have. And I don't know if that's the best way to parent. I think being able to provide them experiences, provide them time, and to be able to, hopefully one day have intellectual conversations and teach them to be intelligent and how to think. I think that's the most powerful thing. I tell the kids, you want toys, you want all that stuff, you'll throw that stuff out in 3 years. Like once a year, we used to do this. Every 6 months, we'd go through and pick up their toys. We'd put them in a box, and 6 months later, we'd bring out the toys, and they'd be like so excited, here's new toys, put the old ones back. They just kept getting the same toys. But it's more about new. So I think parenting comes down to like what, and my one daughter made a funny point where she said, she said, Dad, I feel like your job is to try to teach me things and have, like conversations and explain and teach. Like, is that all dads do? I'm like, 100%. Because one day I'm not going to be here, and all you're going to have is these stories and me talking about how things work and trying to teach you different life lessons. I mean, to this day, my dad's been gone 7 years. And I still we'll still tell stories and try to use examples. Like, my dad taught me this, or this is how he explained things. And like, that's the only thing I can take with you. I mean, you're not going to be able to take gold. The Egyptians couldn't do it. Nobody's been able to do it. I mean, who is it? Jacob Rothschild, one of the richest dudes in the world, passes away. What did he take with him? Nothing. He went out the exact same way everybody else goes out. Yeah. So all you have is the influence.
Yeah. I think you're setting standards, right, for your daughters to go out there. And, I think they'll be seeking relationships, whether they are romantic relationships or just friendships with men who have set the similar standards for themselves.
Sure.
And I think, if you hit your children, then subconsciously they're going to go and try to find a similar man that will hit them or they will abuse them physically or verbally. And if you are patient with them and the explaining part, sit down, let's talk about it, is just the norm, they will not know any better.
Yeah.
So I think you're just setting them up for, not saying a success, but at least, they would know what's right or wrong.
Yeah.
And I think this is the best you can give them. I think the flip side is like, I grew up with very little. Now we can afford a lot of things. So the question is, okay, do you go on nice holidays and bring your kids with you, or you go to the fucking river and you play in the mud? That's what I did with my mom.
Yeah.
Right? And I had equally fun. But I work hard to get what I am. Yeah. Right. And together with my husband, we want to have nice holidays. We don't have it very often. So we bring our children and we think, okay, what do we do later on when they're going to get used to like staying at the, all this nice resorts, and they don't know how to play in the mud. Like literally, that's what I used to,
So what you have to do is you have to split it up. So we went to Costa Rica, was it 2 years ago? And so for the first 5 or 6 days, we stayed at this place up in like kind of this house up in the mountains. The place had no doors and no windows. And it was probably like 80, 90 degrees. They just had ceiling fans and mosquito nets. And there was like a yoga retreat that we stayed at, which was super weird. I don't know where my wife found it. But like the lady that cooked, and it was cool. We rode horses. There was a beach. I mean, it was pretty like, what was it? Swiss Family Robinson, right? And then after like 6 days, we went to the Four Seasons at Papagayo in Costa Rica. And I'm not telling you. I mean, I've been a lot of nice places. That might be one of the nicest resorts we'd ever stayed at. It was like air conditioned. The beds were amazing. The food was kick ass. And we had a great time. And the kids had so much fun. They were like, this place is great. So it was almost that the first part of the trip made them appreciate the second part of the trip. And so my wife and I have like talked about it, like any place that we're going to go, we're going to stay something kind of a little bare bones, and then we'll stay somewhere nicer on the back end to maybe give them perspective. But I agree with you. I think it's important to travel with your kids. I know just being able to have, I mean, because America is so big, you know this, like traveling to another state for me, like going to like Colorado and whatnot, is the same thing for you guys in Europe to be able to go to, you know, France and Spain. It's just like states. So I think what happens is, because there's so much here in the US, people don't travel, and it doesn't give them any appreciation for outside the world, or more importantly, how other people live or other people's, you know, perspective. I mean, I'm sure you're in London and you can spot Americans a mile away. You know, you're like, wow, White Sox. Like it just.
Well, I think first of all, Americans that travel are different than the Americans that do not travel. But I think when you say, first of all, I think the size of the country is a problem. I think it's, second of all, like it does feel that America, even from Europe, is a center of the world. And I think when you watch news, everything is about America. Like even if something really bad happens in Europe or good happens in Europe, it rarely makes the headlines in the US because it's happening already so much in the US.
Sure.
So I think there is very little exposure to anything else because it is so big. And like, you know, I remember when I got to the States and we were in this sort of community college in Kansas, and I had a lot of like, cool kids, but a lot of them never left the state of Kansas. And so they were asking us questions like, oh, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from Poland. It's like, oh, like where it is it like in South America? So they wouldn't know where it is. And we were even making fun, okay, we don't eat with forks and knives, right? I was like, really, right? So we were playing different games. And, you know, we found it quite funny. But I think if you can actually show the kids how the Europe looks like, how sort of South America looks like, and I think, like you say, if you can invest in travels and show them different places, you would install like curiosity, and so they can actually see what non-Americans look like, how they eat, how they think, how they dress, right? And everything has sort of pluses and minuses, whether you are in US or, you know, in Europe. But that's one thing, you know, I also want to provide for my children and for myself, like, let's see as many places as possible. And, you know, let's see, in the end, if I have some money left, I talk to my husband, like, we're going to leave them money for education and for healthcare. The rest, they have to earn it. Because I feel like if I'm going to buy them an apartment, which me and my husband didn't get from our parents, like we kind of depriving them from the accomplishment of actually making it. Like, imagine if you get, whatever, you won the championship, just like this, like you have it. It'll be nice, but it's not the same, right? It's actually earning it. So, and I feel like it's the same with, you know, I said, oh, maybe what about like a small apartment? But what about not, right? What about they don't have to worry about education, and they don't have to worry about healthcare. And this is like maybe a communist approach, because these are the only two things, and very much European, that are, you're right, education and healthcare. You know, in the US, it's very different, right? Both actually are, you have to have quite a bit of money to be able to go to a certain, you know, university, or get even, you know, any type of good healthcare. But if we can provide it at least at the upper level, like this is where the money goes. If you want to go to university, you go, this is the money. If you, I don't know, have cancer, or if you, I don't know, have life-threatening disease, use it. But it doesn't go to your, you know, nice car.
Yeah, your party fund.
Or your party fund. I mean, I hope my children will be smart enough not to abuse it. But I think it's not about that. It's like making it on your own. I think it's the best feeling ever.
I used to, when I retired from the NFL, I got headhunted to work for CrossFit. I worked for CrossFit for almost 9 years, and we taught hundreds of seminars around the globe. I was taking a flight. We were teaching in Copenhagen, and I flew from, I want to say, like, I can't remember what the hub was, but basically flew like a long flight from somewhere in the U.S. to Copenhagen. And I was in first class. I sat next to a guy who was a Danish, but worked for a company that did like the big windmills. So he had a lot of projects in the U.S. And so we sat and really interesting. And he finally turns to me and says, how can you live in a country that is fighting for standardized, socialized healthcare with people that don't care about their health? And that was and I remember we got in this whole healthcare discussion, and he made such an interesting comment where he talked about, homogeneous societies, like you got Finland, Sweden, Norway, and these different kind of Baltic, put, Denmark into that. And he goes, it's this homogeneous society where you're walking down the street and potentially everybody you run into potentially could be your cousin and looks like somebody you know. So he said, in those countries, standardized healthcare is a lot easier, because if you are not if you're out of shape, or you get sick, or you don't walk, or you don't do things that are considered within the social norm, which is keeping yourself in shape, and you become a drain upon that, that's frowned upon in our country. Whereas here, they tend to revel and like celebrate people that are unhealthy. And he was just like, how do you live in a country like this? And I realized, I was like, well, the U.S. is not a homogeneous society. Everybody you come across looks different. It's this melting pot. And he's like, he goes, I travel here for the work all the time, and I can never be so happy as to leave and go back to Denmark. So, and my family, my grandparents came from Denmark. So they were from a little town, a little beach town called Faaborg. So I'd spent a decent amount of time in that part of the world, and always really enjoyed it. It was a lot of tall people. When I went to Denmark, I mean, I'm almost 6'6", and everybody was like, 6'3" and over. So it was kind of neat to be around a lot of tall people that were, looked like cousins of ours. But it's definitely interesting to be able to travel the world. It gives you, I think, a greater appreciation. And one of the things that I do stress for people, especially that have kids, is it's important to travel with your kids so that you show them things, but it's also important for them to travel and to feel that this is something to be able to go see. Because just about every other culture, look at the Australians, look at, where you're from. I mean, people travel the world, they go to different places, they see things, they go and work. And it just, I think, creates a much more intelligent person, because they're open to more things and they've seen more so than people that are just stuck within their own little microcosm.
And I think Americans in general are very open. And to be honest with you, like when I see like Americans in London, I'm like, oh my God, yeah, let's talk, talk to me. Like I really miss that, because they are so open compared to British people. They are much more cold and reserved. But London also is such a collection of so many different nationalities. And I think I really love London for that. But I think Americans, if they just force themselves to get out more, like they would love it more than they think. And a lot of people love Americans because they're just so open. There are different jokes, I'm sure, about Europeans and Americans in Europe. But overall, I think they would love it here, and they really should. Instead of going to Hawaii for the 5th time or Mexico, like I think the European trip is a must.
Yeah.
And within like literally, you can go to. My husband's Italian, so we go to Italy to like every town will be really different. Like the food will be like completely different. And then you go to France, Spain, like the culture shifts, and there's so much appreciation for food, for wine, and I think the food culture in London is amazing, but in Europe is like another level. I think, look, US also has, I'm sure, very good. I remember when I was a broke student, I didn't have that much money to eat, but there is also a lot of people, from different cultures. But you go to Italy and you spend you go to just some shop, and you're going to get like super high quality food.
Yeah.
Where I feel when I live in Kansas, like the best thing we could eat, it was a Chinese buffet. I remember for like $4 or $5, and you had to pay extra $2 for the Coke, but I didn't have the money. So
I lived in Kansas. I played for the Chiefs, so I lived in Missouri and Kansas, kind of on the border, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It's I feel like in Italy and a lot of these countries like that, there's a certain cultural expectation, like nobody goes to Italy and it's like, yeah, we ate this place. It was awful because that place just wouldn't exist. So it's kind of a different piece. But I actually always enjoyed London just for like the diversity and it's, yeah, I mean, we were always very, very fortunate to travel when we were younger. I think my parents kind of erred on the side of like being able to take us places and show us things, especially at a young age when it was impactful, more so than, I had friends whose parents would buy, had like, I don't know, dirt bikes and trailers and shit and would drag it out to the desert and do redneck shit out in the desert. Whereas my parents were more, hey, let's travel to different places and see things. So I feel like that increased a certain appreciation for, maybe a global culture. So, obviously now that you've transitioned into mom, I know that you're doing personal coaching. Is it like life coaching or kind of like more like mental preparation? How does that work? And more importantly, like what's the clientele and, how does that piece fit into it all?
So initially I started I wanted to do coaching with people. So I actually, well, with people, with actually, I want to get in there. So I thought, okay, how can I get in there? How can I get clients? And kind of very initial transition was to do career coaching for investment bankers because that's what I've done. And it was fairly easy to get clients. But then what I've noticed is once I was coaching my clients, we were talking about 90% of the time, actually not about the career, but everything else that affects, their performance at work. And I thought it was a similar sort of theme when you think about high performers, even as an athlete. I felt that once you reach a certain point, it's not so much about the technical things. You know what you do, you can always make improvements, but how you show up, on the football field, on a tennis court, is very much just about your mindset. Not just, but it's such a big part. When you reach that level, technical skills alone are just a given. You have to have it. But that mental strength, preparation, and I think stories that you tell yourself and you start believing that are true, that are actually causing you to not push enough or not try things or believe that there are external things that are stopping you. But what I start seeing that a lot of my clients were their own worst enemies. It's not the job. It was not the company. Yeah, sure, in certain circumstances, it was the company that was, or maybe the boss was shitty. But, the same thing as blaming, oh, your coach is shitty. That's why you cannot be a good athlete, right? But what can you do with what you have? So initially started with people in banking only, but over time, I wanted to expand because, and naturally I start having more people outside of finance. So I'm like, okay, if I'm coaching them anyways about everything but the job, I might as well take a much broader view and a perspective. And all I want to coach people with a certain mindset. I call them, I'm a coach for top 1%. It's nothing to do with the income, but much more with the aspiration to be in the top 1%, whatever you do.
But how do you define top 1%?
How do you define that? Tell me.
I don't know. I mean, top 1%, would that be like financial? Would that be education? I mean, would that be people with terminal degrees? Like whenever people talk, whenever I see that pop up in either like social media or somewhere in the news, they're like, oh, the top 0.1% in this. And they usually attach some form of like monetary number, like people that make excess of, 7-8 figures fit within like the top 0.1%. And I usually see it with some I have a extreme dislike for what I call hustle porn, which is like on social media. It's like the Andrew Tate, there's usually like him in a Bugatti with some fucking, what's the word, innocuous quote where it's like, you have to hustle so hard until you can no longer hustle and then you die. I mean, just stupid shit. So, and I feel like that just permeates all over social media, but they're like, I only work with the top 1%. So whenever I hear that statement, I always just want to know, like, how do you define, or more importantly, how do people group themselves into that? Is that based upon financial wealth, what you have in the bank, or more like education, or what you're doing performing wise?
Put it this way, I don't look at the bank account. I have my fees like everyone else. And regardless whether someone is in top 1% or not, if they, if we get to the point we want to work together and, you have your fees, then, it doesn't matter whether they are in 1 percentile in terms of the income. It's completely, I don't care how much my clients make. Let's put it like, what I care about, that they want to be in top 1%, whatever they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried to be top 1% in tennis, and I didn't make the money. It has nothing to do with the money. And I want to be top 1% in the schools in the world. And I think, it's not like I made a lot of money. I want people who have certain mindset, they just want to be the best they can. They want to be in top 1%. And if money comes as a byproduct, great. But I don't want to, I guess, be working with people who are just kind of, maybe it would be nice to talk about things. I don't like to take things slow. I want to work with people. And I think I resonate best with people who just want to have very direct and like no bullshit approach. They know what they want and they need just extra push. And they know it's not coming from anywhere else from the environment, and they need someone externally to help them with that. It's nothing to do with the money. It's not like I want to work only with billionaires. And in fact, I don't think it's that fun to work with a trust fund kid.
No,
right?
No, because they're working without they're working with a net. Like I consult for a client here in Austin who's a billionaire, and it's pretty interesting, like just discussing money and like the perception of things. I mean, even if he lost everything, like it's such a insane number. I try to explain it to my kids that it's like 1,000 millions, So like if you were to lose, I don't know, 500 of those millions, like you still have 500 more millions. It's just like, it's such a different thing. Whereas I think those people, and realistically, there are people that fit within that. I just don't know if like those people are in the position, like, are they trying to build mindset and like for the work that you're doing, is it more like coaching them kind of socially to help them be better versions of themselves, or actually on the business side?
Like in terms of business, I think they definitely know much better than I do. But equally, like when you think about like, take apart how much, I think when you make a lot of money, it's not like your problems go away. You still have similar problems, just at the different scale.
Sure.
And certain insecurities will sort of come in. I have clients that they actually make enough money, whatever it is, that they feel like, they don't know what to do with themselves anymore. And this is a very difficult and scary place to be, because perhaps a lot of my clients have been actually building wealth from scratch. And that's why, and then they get to this point where maybe the mortgage is paid off, the kids, go to college or have enough money to send them through college. They have a secure position at the company. And then what?
Yeah.
Right? And you've been working so hard for so many years, and you feel like you've achieved what you just achieved. You would feel a certain way, but you got there and you feel like shit. Or you feel like, it's not what you have not, feeling wise, you just still feel like, you've been kind of lied to. And how can you push from here?
Is it because everybody's been sold this idea that, if once you reach this certain level of financial success, or you reach this level of financial security, now all of a sudden all my problems will be gone? And I think the idea that people are working towards a certain goal to be able to afford a life that doesn't have problems, to me is like, I'll use a health analogy. So the immune system that keeps us healthy only works if it's challenged. So, periodically getting sick, like that's not a bad thing. That's actually, defenses where now you're having things challenge your immune system. And if you are never, that immune system is never challenged, it's never strong, all of a sudden something really terrible happens. And now all of a sudden you don't have the ability to defend yourself, and you don't have the immune function. Your immune system is not robust. So I kind of use that analogy, especially a lot with not only the people I work with or some of the other stuff. At some point you have to have challenges in your life to be able to know that you're strong enough. It's like lifting weights, right? I got to lift a little bit heavier tomorrow than I did today, so I can hopefully, be strong enough to be able to do what I need to do. And I think what happens is people get to this idea where once I reach this certain level, or once I do this, then then my whole life will be this. And all they realize is once they get there, it just causes more problems. I mean, Biggie said it best, more money, more problems.
But equally, when you think about, a great NFL players, when they maybe get like a good contract and they know they're going to get the money that, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 million that, they can live off potentially for the rest of their life.
Sure.
My question to you is like, then what? Like, they still, they might struggle with the fact they have so much money but they still need to push.
Yeah.
Right. So having that financial stability, can cause problems for the drive, right? And they don't have that fear anymore of financial insecurity that, in my opinion, it's been driving me a lot in my life because I didn't have a cushion to fall on.
Mm-hmm.
And as bad as it sounds, I wanted to make money. I didn't want to make money. I just wanted to feel financially secure. But when you get to this point, then you, okay, and now what? Like, this is it? How do I push myself from here? If this has been driving me to a certain point, what else can drive me, to do more, to be better? And the problem with a lot of people when they reach this stage, they don't have many people to turn to because a lot of people around them be like, why are you complaining? Like, you are rich, you are famous, you have everything, you have no, you shouldn't even be complaining about it. It's like, so then they feel bad for even bringing it up. Maybe they still are surrounded by friends that make half what they make. So how they can bring up about them wanting more, because everyone around them is going to say, you know what, why would you push for more? Like, so it's a lot of like internal battle for them. They want to do more, but they just don't know how without upsetting other people. Or I think also elevating yourself to next level, it takes a bit of work internally to see yourself, and money at that point, in my opinion, is not about accumulating wealth. It's just about, it's like trophy, right? When you play sports, you win championships. In business, like for you even, when you make more money, it doesn't represent anything else, just the number or the trophy. It's not like you're going to go now and, I don't know, buy bigger cars, bigger houses. A lot of my clients, they know that physical things are not bringing them satisfaction, but the satisfaction of, improving their careers, their businesses, their lives. This is very tangible.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just need help with it because it's so isolating on top, in my opinion.
Well, for me, more stuff gives me more anxiety. So I really fight into that, Tyler Durden Fight Club. The more stuff you own, the more it owns you. And that's ironic because I live on a ranch here in Texas and I have like a track loader tractor and forklift and I got equipment for our property and there's always like something needing like more. And I my wife jokes, she's like, how are we ever going to sell this place? Like at some point, when the kids leave and we go to downsize and, hopefully don't have to live on a big piece of property anymore. She's like, how do we get rid of this? I'm like, I guess we just got to slowly chip it away. But unfortunately, you can't live on a good piece of property. And, we have a creek and manage and do all this stuff. Like you need a certain level of equipment. And I think what happens for a lot of people, they come out and they want to live on a ranch and buy a bunch of property, not realizing that you either have to hire somebody that knows how to weld and do, dirt work and all this. And I have a pretty good skill set, so I can do a lot. But there's an interesting balance where, when I went to Berkeley, I lived around the corner from where Jack Kerouac lived. And Jack Kerouac, who wrote, On the Road and the Beatniks and, the age old, if you own a rug, you own too much. So I always kind of subscribed to this like minimalist lifestyle. And now that I have kids and lived here, it's anything but. Like I got a gym full of equipment and like we work on stuff. And it's just, it's like a daily balance of like trying to be somewhat streamlined, but also realizing that you do need stuff to kind of do this. I mean, in hindsight, I told my wife, I'm like, we should have bought like a little postage stamp lot with one of those houses built outs without a yard, and we wouldn't need any of this stuff. And she's like, yeah, but then we wouldn't be living on land in Texas. So it's kind of an interesting balance. But I'll tell you, I think the more that people accumulate and the more money they have in this, I think what happens is they think that these things are going to make them happy when they realize, like, if you don't have all the other stuff in check, you're never going to be happy. And like I was saying, for my billionaire client, his health was an issue. So he hired me to help him get in shape. And I don't do that. That's not really my job. But he hired me, and I figured if I can't go a few days a week and hang out with a billionaire and learn something, then I'm an idiot. So I go and I've helped this, 72-year-old man. He's put on 11 pounds of muscle. He's gotten in shape. He's lost 40 pounds, fixed all of his blood work. I mean, he's like a completely different person now in the year that we've been working together. And it's pretty amazing. For all the money, he's like, I didn't realize that if I didn't have my health, I wouldn't be able to enjoy any of this stuff. And he's like, I thought that, when I made a lot of money, just more stuff would make me happy. And he's like, it just made me feel shittier because I couldn't enjoy it because I wasn't in shape. And so now I've realized that the greatest flex for a lot of rich people is being in really good shape, being really healthy, so you can go out and do the things that you want to do, and you're not a prisoner of your own body.
Yeah, and that's the type of my clients is they'll come to me that not they want to make more money because they find financially struggling. It's just they reach the point where what is the next push, what is the next challenge, right? And sorting out their life so they can actually focus on something else. Stop buying things that they know they're not making them happy, right? Invest in things that actually bring them joy. A lot of them have been working very hard, and they have not spent enough money with their parents, right? And that are going to pass away soon. With their children, that they send them to best schools in the world, but they completely lost touch with them. So it's a small things that I remember. For someone who is on their way to make money, it's like, oh, why would you even worry about those problems? You have all the money in the world, but the money doesn't solve those problems. And my point is that still doesn't matter how much money you make. There are problems when you have a lot of money. There are problems when you have very little money, and in between, the problems do not go away. They're just different.
So you've been fortunate to live in the U.S. You live in London. You grew up in Poland. I'm sure you're, like you said, your husband's Italian. Where do you think the ideal place to live in the world is? Like I'm kind of obsessed with this, and always kind of interested when I meet people that are kind of world travelers. I look at all these blue zones, and for longevity, you see the videos of people living in, the northern Italy. It looks like amazing. And, you've seen them live out in, Turkey and different places, and, Costa Rica and whatnot. So I always think, of all the places you've traveled, is there any place that you've been where you're like, I could pull up stakes and live here for the rest of my life and live the life that I wanted?
Look, I think for people like myself and my husband, that we don't need a lot of space. I think London is amazing because it gives you the best cuisines. I think the collection of so many people from different parts of the world. But obviously, when you buy a house, it's like a shoebox. It's extremely small. So if you can, you would definitely not be able to have all the equipment that you have, for the price that you pay. Even if you have the money, I think, just London is so condensed, but it has this amazing feeling of not being in a city. Initially, I didn't like it when I came here. The weather was horrible, and to be honest, it still sucks. So I think the worst part is the weather, but the beauty about it is there are 4 or 5 different airports within 45 minutes to an hour, and you can jump on a plane and go to warm locations within an hour to 3, right? Like tomorrow we go with my husband to Ibiza for a weekend for 3 days, right?
You guys are going to Ibiza for the weekend?
Yes.
Oh my! I'm so jealous.
But this is this is my first trip outside of.
Are you guys
London.
a little old for Ibiza? Every time I see the videos from Ibiza, it all looks like 22 to 23-year-old kids.
What videos are you watching?
I'm a fan of EDM music. So some of the people I follow on EDM, I'm always fascinated by different DJs. And so like I said, I do jujitsu. And the guy that I train with, Shanji Habero, he's big into music. And so he constantly is sending me all this stuff. And one of the places, it's one of the top spots for all the DJs is always Ibiza. And it looks like Vegas, but way cooler. So just everybody I've ever seen, they always look like they're in their 20s. And I always could I show up in my 40s to Ibiza, or would I be out of place?
No, I think Ibiza is a place, doesn't you see as, don't forget Spanish are they eat at 10:30 at night, right? They like to stay up until throughout the night. They wake up late. I think when you go there, you have the place for the crazy young crowd, but you're gonna get your sort of 20s, 30s, 50s, and 60s. And I think it's an amazing place where you find it's not what you think it is. It can be that, but it can be also, a relaxing place with the family. You get your amazing food, the service, the quiet place. And, if you go to this place, you're not going to find like loud music or kids sort of jumping up and down, to some hardcore, techno music. But this is my first trip since last September because, I had the 1-year-old and I was breastfeeding. So that's also, additional sort of challenge with traveling. This is my time has come, I believe, so I'm very excited. But that's the beauty about, so and to answer your question, I think London is amazing because even if you travel, other places in Europe, you go to Paris, but then not many people speak English there, and French might not be that.
I spent a lot of time, or a decent amount of time, in Paris. Other than I remember the coolest day I had in Paris is we went to the Champs-Élysées, it was the Sacré-Cœur. So we went up there and then we walked down, and I went to the Moulin Rouge. Went to the shows at the Moulin Rouge, and there was a place that had an amazing espresso and hung out. So I mean, I've had some one or two few really cool experiences in Paris, but as a whole, I did not like it.
No, I didn't like it either, but I think, London has that sort of very, very international vibe. And if you like it, if this is I rather pay a lot of money for my rent, for my food, because I live in a shoebox, but I just want the experience of being in an international city surrounded by a lot of different, interesting people. And that's what keeps me going. If you box me into, and I think maybe this is just coming from me being in Poland, where everyone is the same, right? Everyone is driving the same thing, wearing the same thing. Everyone is kind of that's what was boring to me. But London, I think, and I lived in New York, Texas, Kansas, California. My husband is Italian. We travel around Europe. I cannot think of any other place in the world so international, so open-minded. And it has this downside. Yeah, it's extremely expensive, and the weather sucks. Yeah. So these are two things but I think when you have kids, you don't care as much about, super hot days every single day. Now it's actually, because a lot of places don't have AC still in London, right? It's all sort of Victorian houses. We don't have AC in a house. Yeah. And today is quite hot, but it does not happen very often that you have a super hot weather.
I remember I was in London, this is years ago, and it was they had a heat wave, and there was no AC in any of the rooms, and the walls were so thick, and it was hot to the point where they actually brought in portable AC units into the hotel rooms. And I remember just seeing a lot of pasty people walking around in shorts and t-shirts, and they just was not the social or not the norm for that level of heat. But I mean, coming from the US and Texas and whatnot, there's nowhere I can go in the world where I think that the weather is worse than here. Even when we went to Mexico, Costa Rica, whatnot, they're oh, the weather's hot. I'm like, it's not nearly as bad as it is in Texas. So we're pretty lucky for that anywhere else you go in the world is going to have nice weather.
Yeah, it's difficult for you to go on a summer holiday. Everywhere else you go is going to be just cooler, right?
Which is actually nice. We look forward to it. But I always really loved in my travels, anywhere that was I did really like Stockholm. I really liked Denmark. I liked Sweden, and Norway was expensive. I mean, Norway was really expensive to the point where I remember we went out and I was just lunch cost us $300, and it was Subway sandwiches. So I think you just have to kind of couch that and realize it's just expensive. But I thought the landscape was amazing. It was clean. It wasn't overpopulated. I thought that, there was a lot of people outdoors. It's always a good indicator if you go someplace where there's a lot of people outdoors riding bikes, moving around, which is what I really liked about, Stockholm and some of those cities, and Copenhagen the same way, and London's the same way too. A lot of people walk, a lot of people outdoors.
Yeah, I think Nordic countries are generally quite expensive, but when you go to you can go to Italy, south of Italy, and you literally have the most amazing pizza for $5, and wine for probably the most expensive wine you would ever buy would be maybe $20, and it's top of the range. So I don't want anyone to think that Europe it's that expensive that, every single lunch is $300 because it doesn't need to be. And I think when you go to like remote, smaller locations like Puglia in Italy or Sicily, like actually it might be cheaper to do holidays there than in the US for, for the amazing quality of food and experience. Of course, the ticket is always going to be expensive. And I would say never travel to Europe in August because Europeans, they just shut down for the month of August, especially Italians. And it becomes very, overcrowded and extremely expensive. But any month outside of August is June, July, even September, the weather is still amazing and the prices are just half what they're going to be in August.
Did you ever travel anything down to like the Black Sea, down to like Moldova and Romania and some of like those places? Like I've had friends that have traveled all over and they think that like the Black Sea and some of those places down along there are just some of the most amazing places they've been.
I haven't, but I really want to go. I think they really changed over the last 5-10 years. But I think now with kids, it's just difficult for me to travel. But I think like even Croatia and all this sort of Eastern European countries, like they're becoming extremely beautiful and still becoming more and more expensive. But I would definitely recommend, going there. I personally never traveled in this sort of part. I've been Russia and Ukraine, but not Romania. Maybe I've been to Romania, but when I was playing professional tennis, all I ever saw was airport, tennis courts, hotel, airport, tennis. So I've been probably to like 60 countries in the world, but when people ask me, oh, how was like, Hong Kong or how was Malaysia or how was, Brazil or, Japan. Like I remember I flew to Japan for like just went to Tokyo, got on a train, tennis courts, 3 matches, packed my stuff. Airport, Mexico. So I've never, as sad as it sounds, like for a long time, unfortunately, I've never seen anything. I never could like swim in any of the swimming pools because I don't know how it's now, but back in the days you were told that as long as you're competing, you're gonna go swimming because it will like slow you down and you'll relax your muscles too much. I don't know, maybe things change right now, but at least back then we could never use swimming pool when we're competing. So all these beautiful places, and all we could do is just, eat, sleep, play, travel.
So reflecting on your journey, because it's been a pretty amazing one, like what advice would you give to somebody that's maybe stuck in their career, stuck in their life and doesn't know how to move forward and is just in that stagnant place where they need a reset?
I think at least looking at my journey, I've been in every step of my journey, I felt stuck. When I finished playing tennis, when I graduated even from, good university, investment banking, there is always something that you've learned in the past that you can use in the future, whatever it is. And might be it. I don't think it's the next step is always just the end of the journey. And I think, now when I've made so many different moves and changes, I realized that maybe the next 1 or 3 or 4 years is just a stepping stone to something better and bigger and different. And embracing that instead of seeing as a failure. I thought like, I played tennis, I failed, but now I see it as the biggest blessing that I actually had the opportunity to compete, to travel, to be at that level, and see other play against really good players. And I think I've acquired so many great skills. And going through community college in Kansas and Texas and UC Berkeley, a lot of times we just want to get to the goal. But I think it's hard to enjoy the journey because sometimes when you're in it, like it's hard to enjoy it. But now whatever I do, I know I'll be fine. And because as long as you're challenging yourself, whatever you do, and you put your head down and you work hard, I know that the results will come. But back in the days, I felt like, I wanted the answers now. I want the end results now. But right now, I feel like, what? This is where the beauty is. It's in those little things every single day that you do on the way of becoming someone new. And I think like, I shed my sort of, skin or layers every single day and I become someone new. And I really love about this journey, about the struggle, about not knowing, but yet doing the work today. And as long as I can go to bed, in the end of the day, knowing that I've done everything I could on my short-term journey to something, I won.
Dude, that's awesome. I'm pretty much good. If there's anything else you want to rap about, I think that's a pretty good place to cut it. But
yeah, no.
If people want to learn more, or maybe get into your coaching and connect with you, what's the best way? Social media, LinkedIn. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm using mainly LinkedIn, but they can also find me through my website. It's KasiaSiwosz.com, and they can reach out to me. Also on LinkedIn, I'm not really into Instagram, or I'm pretty sort of old style, so I'm not very present there.
I'm jealous. I always told people that the day that I made it big is I wouldn't have social media anymore. And I would just kind of disappear like a smoke bomb. But we still have it. It's great for the podcast and for the company. So.
No, of course. And I think, at some point, perhaps, I will get there, but I had to be very conscious with my time.
Yeah.
And where I can, I just don't have the team to actually help me and support me. And I think putting stuff out there just for the sake of it, it's not what I want to do. So I think when I'm going to get some time and resources and, managing my business and kids, I just didn't want to compromise on the quality of my work, even if it's through social media. And I see a lot of people just posting a lot of stuff that's just boring, repetitive, and I just unfollow them. Mm-hmm. I am very much a consumer of, social media, but I feel like I want to put the quality out there.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and tune in to another episode of Power Athlete Radio.
No.
Hey there, Power Athlete Nation. Big shout out to all the heavy hitters who stuck around till the final whistle. If you've been soaking in the knowledge bombs and epic tales we've been dropping for free, here's your chance to be a game changer. Swing by kofi.com/powerathlete and toss a few bucks our way to keep the podcast fueled and firing on all cylinders. That's ko-fi.com/powerathlete. Your support makes a difference. See ya.